All right. Hello and welcome to the Honey Tea Podcast. I cannot believe this is episode 11. Normally, I'm recording in at my desk. Family members just got home, and the little one always gets worked up when the older kids get home. So I'm in my bedroom. We'll see how it goes. So I'm recording for the YouTube channel today as well. My handle for YouTube is Melissa Salazar Yoga, as well as Instagram is also Melissa Salazar Yoga. MELISSA Yoga. This week I am really trying to be consistent with the podcast because it is something that has really turned out to be really good for me and I enjoy doing it. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't take very long. I already have all of the equipment, which is minimal, to do it. So just trying to stay consistent in putting out the episodes on Thursdays. I know we're at the end of Thursday, but I worked today and I had plans yesterday. So finding some grace and doing what I can. Let's see, my middle child, my daughter, my only daughter, had prom on Saturday, so that was pretty cool. I never made it to my senior year, so it was really cool to be included in that. I met her at her girlfriend's house and we took pictures, and it was a beautiful day. The weather was perfect. A friend of hers loaned her his Corvette, so she drove herself to prom. I wouldn't expect anything less. It was a great day. And then before that, I taught at a local horse farm and day spa. I taught yoga for a couple of classes. So it was just a really great jumpstart to the weekend. I've recently changed jobs, so I'm at a restaurant closer to home. So I don't work on Sundays anymore. So I had like a full weekend. And if you're in the restaurant industry, then you know how precious that time can be. Um, let's see what else is going on. Memorial Day weekend, that snuck up on me. I didn't even realize that it was so close until I think I said to my son, my youngest, I was like, man, I can't wait for the pool to open. And, or maybe it was the oldest. And then he was like, yeah, it's next week. So that came quick. Very happy that I am as comfortable as I am in my skin, that I'm not doing that thing that I've done in the past where it's this mad dash to, lose weight or make my body look a certain way. And this dang on thing, what is happening? Oh no. We're going to have to move that around. Hang on, bear with me. I'm not great at this yet. Okay, cool. So just recapping, because the podcast recording studio just kind of tapped out there. I was just saying that I'm grateful I'm not in a space where I have been before in my life, where I don't want to say self-conscious, but as a woman, like this internal dialogue that we need to look, fill in the blank. Today I look at my body as this magical vessel that has brought 3 humans into the world, and it's still alive. Like, it can still work, it can still feel, it can still think. So it's really nice to be in that space, because it's hard, trying to fit into this mold that other people or society or sometimes even ourselves have created for ourselves. And this pressure, and then it's like you can't even enjoy being at the pool or the party or the wedding or whatever it is, because you're so hyper focused on the body. Um, so yeah, Memorial Day weekend, this weekend, super excited. The local pool where we go, they've done some major renovations, so that's exciting. Let's see what else. This actually, like the past 3 weeks, I really have observed the more I let go and kind of like take my hands off of the wheel, like I'm still in the car, I'm still going along for the ride, but the more I'm taking my hands off of the wheel, some really cool things are happening where I'm just kind of organically at a place and it leads to another cool experience. So, we're going to talk a little bit about that today for today's episode. Um, and really, what was the catalyst for this episode? One of the restaurants where I work, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I went out back and next to the restaurant, there is a shelter for women and children. You wouldn't know it was there unless you already knew it was there. Um, and I don't know the parameters of, qualifications if it's domestic violence shelter or what it is, but um, there's a shelter there. And it wasn't terribly late at night, but the sun was down, and there were two boys playing, maybe 10 and 6, I'll say. And they were just playing ball back and forth. And I was overwhelmed with so much gratitude, and it brought back so many feelings of where I've been and where I've come from. Um, is this still going? Yes. It brought back so many emotions. Um, while I've never lived in a homeless shelter, I have been through some shit. And there were times where I technically was homeless. I did not have a home for me and my children. So I want to talk a little bit about, and not as like a pity party thing, but just some of the things that have brought me to this amazing space today, because it is those things that happen to you like at your worst. Those times, if you can just keep going, it's what's going to make you who you are. Um, Huge changes don't happen overnight. So they happen with these small, consistent steps, and it's such a process. It happens in layers. Like I'd say the past maybe 9 to 12 months, I've uncovered so many things from my childhood. Just 3 months ago, I uncovered stuff. I was driving to the Poconos to a yoga retreat and had no idea um, that certain things had kind of occurred, and this kind of metanoia came up, not in a spiritual, like organized religion kind of way, but this change of perspective. And that allowed information for me to do more work. So, as these emotions, as these feelings, as these memories come up, really holding them with love and compassion to use it as a guide. It is information, it is knowledge on how to heal yourself. It is not to develop resentments, it is not to develop hatred, because those are blockages. That's what's going to keep us stuck in this sick cycle. So, some of the things that have occurred, and at the time, I'm like, what is happening? Why is this happening? How I handled it and what it has provided for me today in this moment. So, and I'm keep looking at this screen here because I don't want this to screw up. Um, okay, so from the top, I was born in North Carolina, and my biological mother had drug and alcohol issues. So my grandparents raised me, right? Thank God for my grandparents. Thank God for my aunts and uncles. Thank God for everyone who stepped in. I never felt unloved. I never felt any sort of lack, but what I did feel was different. No one else that I knew was really raised by their grandparents. So it wasn't this huge, um, how to say it. I just felt different. I felt different from my peers. I also went to a school that I didn't live in the same neighborhood with most of the kids. So it was a private Catholic school, and I always felt different there too. I had lots of friends. I was accepted by everyone. I accepted everyone. It wasn't clicky, um, but I always felt different. In addition, I was an only child, so there weren't any real peers that I had as a young child growing up. I did latch on to a girl in my neighborhood, um, but there was a huge age gap between me and my grandparents. And while my aunts and uncles did fill some of that void, I could still feel this loneliness growing up. Um, and again, while I was always well liked and pretty social as I got older, internally, I felt like I was a disaster. And I have come to learn about myself. I am today definitely more of an introvert and probably was then as well, but didn't quite know how to navigate that, to verbalize that, or how to foster that. I'm a kid. I don't even know what these words mean at this point. So that was that was just something that came up where it's not necessarily a negative thing, but it was something that made me feel different. Then fast forward, my first marriage, and I'm not going to stay on this too long. I was only married once, but so my first major relationship was, it's probably better that I'm recording in here actually at this point, um, was extremely toxic. And we both played a role in that. And I'm not pointing fingers, but I was at a very formidable age, um, 17, 18 years old. And there was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of fun, and we definitely cared for each other, but there was a lot of abuse. And I feel like I also was a young mother, so that also kind of compounded that and flung me into fight or flight mode. So I'm already kind of uncomfortable in my skin. The addiction and the alcoholism has kind of already kicked in full force. And then I have two children that I need to care for, and just trying to keep my head above water and still work and survive. So fight or flight is what kicked in. I didn't really have any coping mechanisms or tools at this point. It was like this attitude of me against the world, like me and the kids against the world, and fuck it, I'll just figure it out. So there were a lot of geographic changes. Like I still stayed in Maryland, but we moved a lot. Um, always looking for that next big thing. Like this will make it better. This time it's going to be different, right? Um, I worked, like I said, I've been in the restaurant industry for a very long time. So you make your money at night. So I spent a lot of time away from my kids when they were younger. Not a ton, like we created a lot of memories as well. Um, but my grandparents helped me out with caring for them. And there was a lot of times where having a 9 to 5 job would have definitely been ideal, but I probably wouldn't have been able to pay the rent and pay the bills on the wage that I would have earned. So just kind of rolling with it, still in this mode where like I'm young, I have enough energy, we'll just figure it out. We always had a roof over our head, we always had food. Um, so we just keep rolling. And then fast forward, I guess my oldest would have been 4, my daughter would have been 2. Um, I ended up in a psychiatric unit. There was there was a situation that I'd had, and it really didn't align with me. So I kind of just shoved it under the rug and shoved it under the rug. And 6 months later, I ended up in a psych unit. So if you're having any issues, my experience has been deal with them as soon as you realize there's an issue, which goes back to our episode last week about first we need to just acknowledge that there is even a problem, um, an issue, something to work on, and then we can accept it and take some action. So I tried to shove it down, and what happened was my body and my mental state started to bring it to the forefront for me because it just couldn't be shoved down anymore. So I ended up in a psych ward, and that was the first time I had any sort of introduction to cognitive behavioral therapy, analyzing my thoughts from the point of the observer and trying to navigate what was happening. Like, this was the first time I'd sat still in years, like over a decade, and really looked introspectively. So then, fast forward a few years, 4, 5 years later, I'm newly sober. I'm sober for about 3 months, so there's a whole lot of internal changes that are happening, and I did not have the voice that I have today. Like, if you would have told me then, I would be actively teaching yoga and on a podcast that I'm hosting, I wouldn't have believed you because I couldn't even address the issue within my own home. Another toxic relationship, and we stayed together for a decade. Um, Again, we loved each other there, and I still have love for both of those relationships. For both of those people, I wish them nothing but the best. Um, but I didn't have the voice to express my needs and healthy boundaries. So I'm on my knees and I'm praying to God and I'm like, please give me a voice. And that week, in the middle of the night, my entire house caught on fire. And I didn't have renter's insurance. If you don't have renter's insurance, I highly recommend it, um, because we lost everything. A Red Cross, sorry, I keep saying so much, Jesus Christ. Red Cross donated some funds, but we were coming up on winter, that went to clothing, some basic essentials, and that was it. The neighbor across the street opened their home, but it was me and did I have dogs? I think I did. I have one dog at this time and two children. So we're like a whole kit and caboodle. The relationship I was in, he went to live with his mom. So God kind of separated us. And I feel like looking back, at the time I didn't feel like this, but looking back, that really was in part God answering that prayer, like, please give me a voice, because it immediately brought separation. We can ask for what we want and manifest what we want. It's never going to be how you think it's going to be. Chances are it's going to be wildly better when we do the work. So, couldn't stay with the family across the street forever. So, one of the families at my children's school opened their home. They kind of had this like clubbed out, vaulted ceiling, very large room adjacent to their house. So we stayed there, forever grateful to them, even the asshole of a husband who started to become very condescending, and I don't know if sexist is the right word. When I would not have my children, I would maybe go out with friends and come home to him berating me like I was a child. So I was like, this has got to go. Now, I'd been actively looking for a place the entire time anyway, but that really put the fire under my ass. I also had a dog at this point, and the dog became an issue, and it was just not an ideal situation. Very grateful that we had a roof over our head. At this point, I became so close to my creator, God, goddess, Gaia, any one of the Indian gods or goddesses. Like, it evolves and changes for me all the time. But I didn't have anything else. We had clothes donated to us from local churches and people at the job where I had been for only a few months. I had just started at this new job that I would end up working at for over a decade. Um, And that was it. That was all we had. So I felt like I didn't have anything else but prayer. People definitely I leaned on, but it was crazy. Eventually, let's see, that was in October. By January, I'd signed a lease in Mount Washington. One of the students that I was teaching, her neighbor was taking sabbatical in Germany and opened her home to us for 1 year. So that was perfect. Moved in and was blessed with a very unexpected third pregnancy. And he just turned 9 and he's like the coolest little guy ever. So, wonderful addition to my family. What a blessing to be able to have a third child. Um, I was still navigating how to be an adult at this point. So, I'm 31, 33. I'm 33, and I still don't quite know how to be an adult. Full disclosure, I'm now 42 and still don't know how to fully be an adult. Like, I think we're all just figuring it out. There is no rule book. I really believe that even though it doesn't always seem like it, we're all doing the best that we can. And when we can level the playing field and move from a place of compassion rather than a place of judgment, my experience has been I am more open to the day. I'm more open to life and I get less hung up on anger and frustration and hatred. Now, I do have like major, major boundaries and standards, but I can rub shoulders with anyone. And I attribute a lot of that to having lived on the streets, having lived in someone else's house, having had a house fire, having gone through an abusive relationship. I never look at someone, and the money has nothing ever. Listen, I've met the most miserable people that have the most money and the happiest people that don't have shit. So, really, that has nothing to do with it. The material factors, yes, I have a beautiful home. Yes, I love beautiful things. Yes, I love my children to have nice things. But if it all went away, we still have the core of what keeps our family together. And that's communication, love, and just not giving up, really leaning on each other. So at this point, things are starting to change where I'm still in fight or flight, but I'm like, okay, this kind of hasn't been working for however long, and things are starting to change. A lot of it had to do with getting sober, where I was able to really delve into that introspective mindset and look at the role that I'm playing in my own life. And I talked a little bit about this a few episodes ago. So then we have COVID. 2020, I am in a lease at a place here in Westminster. So I'm single at this point, single parent. Um, and the landlord asks me that we need to move out. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So it took me a long time to work through that one because every time I drive by the house, it's right around the corner from my girlfriend's house. I'd look at the house and I'd be like, fucking bitch. So that's me being completely real because that was a lot moving in COVID, having to find a whole new house. And I told the landlord, respectfully, listen, we'll move out when I find a suitable home for my family because the reason that was given was her husband couldn't work because his job was shut down. And I'm like, the entire world is shut down. Are you kidding me? So I remember my little one and I, we went to look at a handful of apartments and townhouses, more townhouses. And you had to wear a mask and you entered a code to go in because the realtors couldn't show it to you because no one could be around each other. Then trying to get qualified was a nightmare because I earned my money through working for tips at a restaurant. The income that I had at this point, we were like 3, 4 months into COVID, I think. I was getting what was it? The COVID money, whatever it was called. And they wouldn't take that as a form of income. And I'm like, listen, like I can show you my taxes for the past, 20 years. Like I am a worker bee. And it just wouldn't work out. So my son and I were at home, and I kept getting brick walls, like time after time, and I was really, really getting discouraged because I wanted out of this situation with the landlord, but I wasn't going to just move in anywhere with me and my kids. Like it really mattered to me that we had a suitable home, a more than suitable home. So I kind of paused for a moment and thought, what can I do right now? Again, going back to those big changes don't happen in one moment. So what can I do that's right in front of me right now? And I looked at my son. He was 6 at the time, and I said, we can go to the park right now. Like that's what we can do. And on the way to said park, it was maybe 2 minutes from my house, I saw a for rent sign on the main road and immediately pulled in and called the number. And I think he had me in here in less than a week. And we've been here since COVID. Um, it turns out a fellow yoga instructor that worked at the same studio used to live in this house. And her wife was also a chef at one of the restaurants where I worked. So they were moving out because they were fearful they wouldn't be able to pay the rent with the restaurants being shut down. Um, Thank God for my landlord. He's amazing. Still, on a good terms with him and everything, like pay my rent on time, all those things. So that was um that was really tough. That was really tough. And I'm trying not to get emotional, but I moved, my ex-husband came and helped with some of the move, but moving everything into this house and trying to get it set up and, again, starting all over. I'm so tired of starting over. So once we were here for a few years, what started to happen was I was able to kind of put down this fight or flight cloak, this wall, this protective barrier that I'd had up probably since I was 17, maybe even younger than that. And a lot of peace and serenity started to trickle in as I did the work. And when I say do the work, it's not, we're going to sit down and journal tonight and check I did the work. The work comes in these times of challenge. The work comes when I'm co parenting with someone I'm no longer with, and they're not doing what I want them to do, or they're saying things that I believe are not true. So that's when the work comes in. I was also fired from a job. What was this? Last year, last fall, I was fired from a job through text that I was at for 10 years. Um, you know, the work was not flashing tires. The work was really staying away from that place until it didn't have an emotional charge. Um, that took a long time. It was just a few months ago that I was able to meet my children there for lunch and came face to face with that person. Um, and I had no emotion or feeling about it. So, working through those challenging points, that's when the work happens. So, today, with all that being said, um, in my life, in my home, in my relationships, I have a lot of space to breathe. I'm no longer trying to fit into someone else's idea of what I should be. And I will paint my house with a Q-tip before I try to figure out why someone doesn't like me anymore. Your opinion is none of my business. It never has been, but that was a new concept and it came over time. And I mean that with so much love. It is not in a hateful or egotistical way. Um, I know my purpose, I know my path, and that's what I'm focusing on. So, no longer overworking myself due to what I have found: three things. First, lack mindset, feeling like there's never enough. If there's money available to be made, I have to be the one to get it. Working 2 12-hour shifts in a row and then getting up. And, at the time, there were moments, especially when my youngest son was born, that I needed to. I had to get up with a baby and I worked two doubles because that's where the money was. I'm in a different space and I no longer choose to do that to myself because I don't feel like it's healthy for my body, my mind, my spirit. Um, Also, overworking myself as a form of distraction. So I'm no longer fearful of sitting with myself, looking at myself, doing the work. Um, and sometimes that means shadow work. So there's darker aspects that are still a part of me, and not running from them, but really using them again as knowledge, as information on. I think knowing that it's still there is very helpful because when times of frustration do come up, then I can gauge, see that side of me, honor that, and then choose how I want to show up in that situation, choose how I act. The feelings, you know, they're always going to be there, but how I choose to act on them, um, is really the important part. Today, there's a lot more laughter. There is a space. I feel more grounded today. So when I am connecting with people, it's really from a place of authenticity and not me trying to gain approval or worried about your opinion of what I'm doing. Because even though, however it appears outwardly, I'm really sharing at an intimate level of how things were internally, inwardly. There were comments that those two long-term relationships, and we're talking like 25 years ago. Some of the comments that were made really stuck with me and were embedded in the muscles of my heart. And it took me years to undo them. And it didn't mean calling those people and rehashing it. This was, stuff that I did on my own because it's bothering me, so I focus on me. Love and light to them, keep the focus on myself. Um, and what has also transpired recently, which is really fun, is I am so much more open to the idea of new relationships, be it romantic, platonic, new friendships, new work endeavors, whatever it is. I'm no longer fearful of being hurt because I'm so grounded and clear and able to verbalize with my authentic voice my boundaries and deal breakers, things I'm no longer willing to tolerate, and things that I'm happy to show up for and be a part of. So that's been really, really fun, the past, I don't know, however many months. I'd like to end, this is a little bit longer of an episode today. Um, So when we hit a problem, right? So I talked a lot about the feelings, but I also like to stay in the solution. That's kind of the gist of this podcast is how do we get through it? Okay? So we've talked a lot about these major life events that have constructed me, but at the time I didn't have the tools. And today I do have the tools and I'd like to share a little bit of a concept. My whole bed just moved. Good Lord. Whew, where's my sage? um okay. Okay. Write down at least 5 possible solutions for the problem. So you're not getting graded on this. Just take a pen and write a C plus at the top. Like just get pen to paper because when you put the pen to paper, it makes it real. This is a little bit of manifesting, but it solidifies it. It's concrete, something you can look at. And there is something therapeutic that happens when we put pen to paper. It's similar but different to talk therapy. So this dates back thousands of years. That's why when you're having a problem, sharing it with one other person that you trust is really important because just getting it out, physically out of the body, whether it's through talking, writing, journaling, whatever it is. So for the sake of what we're doing right now, write it down. 5 possible solutions. Number 2, focus on some creative ways these solutions might manifest. So when we are boxed in and limited and in that victim mentality, all we can see is the hurt. All we can see is the problem. But when we explore expanding the mind, that metanoia again, you can start allowing the brain to go down different avenues because we never know how it's going to go. There's a million and one ways that this solution can be resolved. Brainstorming. Just allow your mind to wander and jot it down. It does not need to be perfect. I've done a brain dump before when I'm really stressed out. I just get pen to paper and I dump out everything that's in my brain. And every single time that I've referred back to that, every one of those issues have worked themselves out. And usually with very minimal effort on my part. It just kind of organically did its thing. And lastly, be open to whatever comes in and expect the best. So that mental manifestation of higher vibe, higher tribe, right? So when you are focusing on, again, the problem, the issue, woe is me, that is what you will attract to you. Like attracts like. When you see yourself as your highest version, then that is what will come to you. Now, there are real wrongs and struggles in the world, okay? This mindset, somewhere deep down in there, has always kind of been a part of me, that kind of, just gussy up and get to it. Internally, I was a disaster. I was in this fight or flight, but looking back, that really served as a coping mechanism and a survival mechanism. So this whole fight or flight thing is not necessarily bad, but what I've observed is now in this space, I no longer need to stay in that all the time. And that's what was happening. Today, I can be in the parasympathetic nervous system. I can relax into the ease and grace of a day a little bit more, but trust and believe, if it came down to it, that fight or flight will kick in and we're going to get shit done. My life doesn't require that anymore. There are no big fires anymore. No pun intended. There are no major issues going on. With that being said, this past December, we got a call in the middle of the night. My daughter was in a pretty bad car accident. Luckily, everyone was okay. So you never know what life is going to bring, and staying grounded and doing the things that fill your cup today is really important for multiple reasons. One of which is you're worth it. And another is we don't know when that ebb and flow is going to happen in life. So thinking, you know, thinking the best for yourself and being prepared for when life happens. I won't even say be prepared for the worst because that's that victim mentality. I feel like I've talked a lot. That's what happens when you're the only one recording. I want to thank everyone who has listened. I'm still blown away that anyone is listening. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next week.